All right, so we got 30 minutes and there's a lot to cover here. And the funny thing is when I talk to people about time as a service and I'm selling time as a service, they look at me and they're like, what? You're selling time? What are you talking about, Steve? Well, we're gonna explain right now and we'll go through it. Send your questions through Slido so that we can kind of get the questions here. And I noticed that Sir Peter Knight's in the room, and I'm going to steal an intro that Sir Peter Knight had said. And I used it actually in my previous panel. Anybody that used GPS to get here today is using quantum technology right now. So it's real, it's definitely there. So, okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're gonna do intros. So I'm gonna ask each one of you, just 1 minute, give us intros about yourself. So Karina, can I start with you?
I'm a senior advisor to Multiverse Computing, and our specialty is tensor networks, quantum software, and AI. We were voted most likely future European unicorn this year, and Europe certainly needs a few unicorns. I also am the founder of the City Quantum and AI Summit, and you're all invited to that on October 7th. It's a pale imitation of this conference, but it's in a palace. And this ain't no palace.
There you go. Actually, I've been there. It's actually pretty impressive. So make sure you invite me, please. Yeah, great, thank you. We have a chief time officer. I don't know if you guys have any chief time officers in your organization, but today we're joined by Richard. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Richard Hoptroff. I founded Hoptroff London in 2015. Our mission is very simple, really. We make sure your clocks are right. So from a system of atomic clocks around the world, I think we've got about 30 or 40 connected to standards institutes such as NIST, NPL, and so on. We deliver time right down to financial services, power, telecoms, and so on, and do all the logging and reporting to make sure that the customer doesn't have to worry about the clock. So it's as simple as that. That's what we do.
Excellent. And there'd be no good panel unless you have somebody from the space industry on the panel. So Elizabeth, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thank you, Steve. So I work at the European Space Agency in the NAVIS program, which is the Navigation Innovation Support Program. And we support companies to develop technology for position, navigation, and timing. So if that's you, come and talk to me. And before that, I worked at the National Physical Laboratory in the timescale department, and I worked on setting up a commercial timing service for the city.
And none of this is possible unless you have the funding or the money. And so that's why we made sure we invited someone from the venture capital world, all the way from LA. Actually, you came from New York, but you live in LA. Damien, would you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Damien Petty. I'm a partner with Morpheus Ventures, and we invest in early stage companies in several sectors, including in quantum computing and quantum sensing. So we've got 3 companies in the portfolio now, and we're looking to add more. We typically come in a little bit after the seed stage when companies are, establishing their technology roadmap and have figured out how to raise some government dollars as well, and help them sort of do that next 24 to 36 months on their journey.
All right, great. Just to remind everybody, if you have questions, please use Slido. And Karina had mentioned that she likes hard questions. So if you got really hard math equations, put them up here so that she can, is that all right? Oh, you did, but
you are not going to be on this earth very long.
Sorry.
Your time on this earth is short.
I was confused. Sorry, I thought that's what you were telling me, but Richard, let me start with you. Tell us, what is this atomic clocks? What is it used for? Why should people care?
Well, anything that oscillates can be used to set time. So if you think of a pendulum, quartz crystal, their vibrations actually are based what a clock is based on. They have problems with temperature because of thermal expansion and things like that. So the atomic clock, anything from cesium atomic all the way up to optical clocks, they all work on the principle that electrons vibrate by jumping between orbits. And in theory, that has no temperature impact because an atom doesn't have a temperature on its own. And the other thing is the frequency gets higher. So pendulum, very slow, that's 1 hertz. Quartz is megahertz. And, atomic, cesium atomic, is 9 billion hertz. So the two things, not being subject to temperature and having that very high frequency, both enable the clocks to be much, much more accurate. So the common source of devices like chip-scale atomic clock, which I used actually to make the first ever atomic wristwatch in the world, has an accuracy of 1 second every 1,000 years. So it gives you an idea of the accuracy. And it's that kind of accuracy improvement that means you can actually synchronize devices for a long time. And so why is this important? Well, the systems that rely on it are things like transportation, radio frequency communication, power. If you lose this time synchronization, these distributed systems just simply can't interoperate.
Yeah, no, it was funny because the first time I met Richard, I was asked to do a bit of research on this, and I was just fascinating about when things go wrong, what can happen, and it's incredible. And the other story, maybe really quickly, I'll tell you about is that while Richard does this today, and he does it within a millionth of a second to offer time and precision time or traceable time, I was down at Greenwich just this weekend, and I went down to the observatory, and there used to be people here in London that would go down to Greenwich, set their watches to the atomic clock, and then walk around London and sell time as a service to people where people would adjust their clocks. And so I guess, Richard, you're like the newest version of that.
That's right.
You do it digitally, right? Everything's going digital, so he's gone digital. Elizabeth, tell us about the advantages of optical clocks and why is it important for positioning, timing, and applications, and what are some real-world examples?
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier GPS and global navigation satellite systems, GNSS, all rely on precise timing. At the moment, they use technology based on cesium clocks, rubidium clocks, which are atomic clocks based in the microwave region, as Richard was saying. In future, these clocks could move to the optical, which will give you hundreds of times more accuracy, because, as you may know, to triangulate your position, you have the clock in your phone, you need 4 satellites in view, each having their own clock. And that calculation is giving you the accuracy of your location. So with the clock technology being so much more accurate, your position accuracy can go down to, centimeter, sub-centimeter level very quickly. And this has all kinds of implications for automotive driving, for aircraft, for all kinds of applications. And in our NAVIS program, we are actually looking to support these kind of developments, also around the resiliency of GNSS, which is actually very vulnerable at the Earth's surface, as the signals coming from space are extremely weak. So terrestrial timing, such as the services that Richard is mentioning, are critical. And in fact, these are provided by the National Physical Laboratory, time as a service for the financial sector, as timing is so critical for energy networks, for financial services, and power grids. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. And I think the space angle is very interesting. I don't know if you guys saw on social media, maybe like 2 weeks ago, everybody was posting about seeing the northern lights all around the world. A lot of people saw that. And everybody looked up at the sky and said, wow, look how beautiful these it looks. But I think the other side of it is people don't understand that's space weather. So those are solar flares having tremendous impact on the electronics that are out in space. So while we're all out there thinking how beautiful, how it looks, people technically were like, oh my God, how are we protecting our electronics, keeping everything to time and stuff like that. Damien, so why invest in this? What's the market size? Why are venture capitalists interested in this space?
So I think, there's a lot been talked about in terms of the market size for quantum computing, and it's a big number, and everybody gets attracted by that. And then they look at some of the estimates for the sensing market, and it's not as big a number, and people get less excited about it. We find that in deep tech, very often market sizes get undervalued because people look at the initial applications, the initial identifiable sort of applications for the technology, and they don't look further ahead beyond that because it may not be identifiable. Like if you think about the invention of lasers, like people looked at it for scientific applications, they didn't imagine that they would underpin global communications like they do today, powering fiber optic cables, let alone entertain Schrödinger's cat. But in sensing, I think we will see an initial wave of better navigation systems, both in terms of sort of improved GPS, but also improved dead reckoning systems like inertial navigation systems. But then there are other applications if you look further afield, such as actually making radar better. So, radar is about hyperfine discernment of frequencies. If you can do that more accurately, you can get a much more precise picture of radar signatures. And there's a whole host of things that can come out of that. So that's what we're excited by.
A lot of excitement behind this and a lot of opportunity. I know in our previous panel, they were talking numbers with a T in it, so opportunities in the trillions, which...
I resisted giving a number, but I think if you say 850 billion is one number that's been floated out there for the quantum computing sector in terms of economic value, whereas sensing is more like 50. But I think, looking at some of the spending that is being put into the sector by governments, I can see that number getting blown away.
All right, excellent. I'm going to go back to Karina, and actually it just reminds me, get your really tough questions ready and all your equations. So, sorry, Karina. Let me come to you. So obviously you've got a very impressive background. You're on the board of Multiverse. How are you guys using this technology?
Well, I'm going to talk about pipes and planes. And this may not seem relevant to you, but it is. In fact, I'm going to talk a bit about defense first, which is at Multiverse what we found. We started off in finance, and now we find more and more of the work we're doing is in defense, and it's dual use, which I think is some of the most interesting stuff that's going to come out. If you think about DARPA, all that military spending came out with loads of civilian products. So I think the same is going to happen. And what's relevant, I think, is... You may say, what's the connection with atomic clocks? Well, atomic clocks are a critical component of quantum sensors because of their accurate timing signals. So let me talk about planes and pipes. And this picks up on Elizabeth's point. So planes, we've got more and more wars out there, and they're spreading. And there was a recent estimate that about 100 million people are affected by bad GPS or GNSS signals. Now, that's a lot of people who cannot depend on it. And it's not just those people. So recently, we think it's the Russians, but nobody quite knows. There were 2 Finnair flights, 2 commercial flights in the Baltics. They had to turn back because their GPS was jammed. Now, that's a pretty frightening thing. And at the moment, they use motion sensors to get back, and obviously the pilot's intelligence and knowledge. But motion sensors drift. They're just not quite good enough, especially, you're talking about 2 planes. Imagine if you were talking about a few thousand planes, millions of planes. All of this is possible because the Russians are becoming more aggressive and so are other hostile powers. But if we had those quantum sensors, which we will have in the next few years, it would totally change the picture, and it totally lightens your dependence on GPS, which is just crucial. And just one more point about pipes. So The problem we have is that we are totally dependent as a society, as the world really, on all those undersea pipes and cables. And it's virtually impossible to guarantee their security. In fact, NATO, maybe it was last week or the week before, just set up a unit specifically looking at the defense of all our underground communications, underground oil, all the rest of that. And what we need is, we can't have enough boats out there defending pipes. So what you need is, when they're attacked, and they have been attacked a few times, you need to have the sort of sensors that can detect a 50p, if any of you know what a 50p is, it's worthless now, but anyway, a pound, let's say a pound hole in a pipe. And if you have those, then you can quickly repair things. Right now, our sensors are really not that good for detecting something in miles and miles of pipes.
Excellent, very, very interesting. And actually, that brings me up to kind of the point, what happens when timing goes wrong? So what are some examples that you can share on and I know when I'm late what happens when something goes wrong, but what happens when, I don't know if, Richard, you look like you really want to answer this one.
Well, sure. So the main reason that time goes wrong is because of GPS interference. There are other ways it can go wrong, such as cyber attacks and so on, but primarily the one that we've got most knowledge of is when GPS access is lost. I can think of 3 examples. That the power systems in the Ukraine are suffering greatly, and it's not because they're getting bombed, it's because they can't synchronize. If they can't synchronize, they just have to shut down. Another example, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in, I think it was 2022, had GNSS interference, and they had to shut down one of the runways so they could land in the traditional way, if you like, just on the one remaining runway, and that went on for several hours. And also in Denver, I think it was last year, there was some kind of outage, which is still completely unexplained, which took out GPS for 36 hours. And it wasn't just Uber that had problems. It was the communication systems, because they some of the radio communication systems, they didn't really have any time type of holdover. They just had GPS. The cell phone networks just about clung on. The sort of cesium atomic clock holdover, you can just about stay in sync for a couple of days, so they just about got away with it. And of course, if you have an optical clock, then you've got a holdover of hundreds of days, months. So these are the sorts of things that can go wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I remember reading about the Dallas one, and it's an interesting story on that one. It was a guy that was trying to avoid his boss knowing where he was. So he bought a GPS spoofing device, which he bought on Amazon for £20 or $20. Wow. Was having lunch, kind of didn't want his boss to know where he was, went by the airport, and by a $20 spoofing device, brought down one runway in Dallas. So you can imagine that somebody was able to bring down, think about the commercial impact of that. And so having ways to make sure that you have that redundancy, because, and please don't go buy this spoofing device. But yeah, no, I found that story to be really interesting. Anybody else want to share some horror stories and scare the crap out of the people in the room? Or? No?
Well, not so much a horror story, but more about the resiliency, so around mitigating these aspects.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned GPS. We also have the European Galileo system, which was developed by ESA. And in addition, to mitigate these risks for critical services like aircraft, they also have EGNOS, which is a space-based augmentation system, which will increase the safety of the signals and provide updates on the authentication of the GNSS signal specifically for pilots, so that they can land safely. And within our NAVIS program, we're also doing a test bed for a UK-based augmentation system. So that's an ongoing project. And as you mentioned, the sensors are so critical. So having these on board aircraft in the future will be really something to mitigate the effects of these weak GNSS signals.
Excellent.
I'd sort of, I'd add just simply one thing. If you look at the, communications networks, coordination of different components of a network can get very complex, and really comes down to managing time. And networks can get congested if that sort of coordination gets messed up. So better time means better coordination of networks. And as we start to look at new quantum networking solutions, especially things like entanglement distribution, there's a much greater need for that coordination. And so the need for basically better time demarcation is going to help that.
Excellent, excellent. I don't see any questions coming up. Oh, never mind. See, there's the equations right there for you. All right, so let's see. What's the biggest issue with chip scaling atomic clocks? Are they already in the market today?
Sorry, were you asking me?
I'm looking to see who's going to make eye contact with me. This is kind of like we're dating here, right? And so whoever makes eye contact with me, and you keep staring at me. So I'm gonna go to Damien first, Richard, and then I'll come back to you.
Well, I guess sort of with the first question, so we're working with much better clocks that are on the satellites as opposed to clocks on your cell phone. Like we get time on our cell phone from the clocks up there with a bit of correction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I like this one. Is the passage of time actually real?
Okay.
I think
You
know what? I think this was Karina.
No, I think it
I'll take
appears
that.
Richard.
All right, go ahead, Richard.
Actually, if you're interested in this topic, this week's New Scientist coming out on Thursday, I think, which is today? Yeah, coming out today, actually talks about this issue, and it argues that potentially time is in fact an emergent property of quantum entanglement. So now we're going in the other direction, and actually quantum is driving time.
We talking about time travel here? Sorry, I might have missed that one. Okay, excellent. Somebody's asking about ion traps, and can we use ion traps instead of optical clocks? What are the likelihood of platform for optical clocks, trapped ion, etc.?
Well, I think that so are they asking which is the likely ion or...
What is the likely platform? For example, will it be trapped ions?
So what would the modality, what's the best modality for keeping time?
Oh, well, I think it would depend on the ion that is chosen. And the latest that I've heard is that it would be an ensemble, like a combination of different either trapped ions or atoms to enable bringing in of different atoms as the technology grows. Because at the moment, the current standard for the SI unit of the second is based on the cesium clock. But in future, it's going to change to an optical. And so I think they want to keep it open to enable... Yeah, it hasn't been decided yet.
It's a good question. I'm sure if you talk to the different vendors here, they'll tell you theirs is going to be the best. I see a lot of shaking hands. I see Dell over there. Dell, anything that's not photonics, he doesn't believe is real. So, see, I already got him going. He's already kind of thinking through. All right, excellent. So we got 6 minutes. I want to kind of end on us and kind of what is the one thing you want to leave this audience with before they can obviously catch up with you afterwards and get your autographs and your selfies together and stuff like that. What do you want to leave the audience with? What do you want to tell them?
I mean, to me, it's just how utterly crucial time is to everything. We did think at this panel, maybe instead of it being serious, we should just give you Shakespearean quotes about time, authors' quotes about time. But time underlines, joking aside, time underlines everything. And one should never make the mistake, and anybody who's studied physics, which I presume 90% of this room has, you know about the importance of time. There is a little anecdote that I want to tell about Sir Peter Knight in a Tudor barge, in a Tudor barge for the Queen's Jubilee, wandering up the Thames with NPL's atomic clock, all the way from their offices, which are in Twickenham, all the way to Greenwich, where it was deposited in, I think, the Time Museum. So it took quite a long time to get there, because it was a medieval barge, but they got there in the end. And Multiverse, we're doing a number of different things. So I'm just going to give you, I've talked about the sensing, but let me just give you one of the other things we're working on that, we'll see what happens. But we've been working on the simulation of atoms using quantum computing. But these simulations, we think, could be useful for the simulation of atomic clocks or for optimizing the design of these clocks. But we'll have to wait and see.
Excellent. Thank you, Karina. And I can tell you, Sir Peter and I, you need to come to more of my panels so that we can keep talking about you. So thank you very much for joining us. Richard.
So just a couple of things. First is the observation that this technology of optical clocks, it's available now. Most of the things you're seeing here at this conference, they're things that will be available. This is something now. And that is the reason I'm interested. I run a small company. We can't think too far into the future. So this technology is available now. But, an optical resonator is just a pendulum. We've got the technology to make the rest of the clock and the infrastructure to actually set it from standards institutes and get it to customers and so on. So I see there's a great synergy between what we do and optical clock manufacturers. So we work very closely with Inflection in this regard. And in fact, Tim Balance from Inflection is here somewhere today if you want to have a chat with him.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. Elizabeth, tell us space, new frontier.
So I think my key takeaway is relevant to the program that I'm working with at ESA, so the Navigation Innovation Support Program. So regarding the importance of resilient timing that we've talked about today, if your company application is developing a product or service around that can improve anything in the space of position, navigation, or time, we would love to support you, so come and talk to me.
Excellent. Damien, why don't you finish this off and tell us how we're all going to make so much money off of this technology, and how do we invest, where do we put our money?
So, I'd leave you with first of all, the sensor market is bigger than I think where we think it is, and I've already mentioned that. But any time that there's a step function in technical capability, it actually unlocks new business models, right? So you used to have to pay for a GPS signal on an old-style cell phone, so we didn't have things like Google Maps and getting directions and so on. You printed it off on your computer. But the moment that positioning became a free product, you had all of these applications and use cases that were built off of it, whether you're talking about ordering a ride sharing or just simply wandering around and being able to see your location on the map. And that's going to happen in this case too. So I mentioned hyperfine radar application. Radar may become sort of get a second generation, if you will. But I'm excited to sort of see what other new businesses people build off of this sort of 10x, actually 100x improvement in time discernment.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I don't know if drinks are straight after this, but if you talk to anybody and they ask you about different panels, make sure you tell them about the panel that sells time as a service. I could tell you I use that as icebreakers, and people look at me like, what are you talking about, selling time? Actually, it's a really interesting, and it's a good icebreaker to kind of get into the conversation. I find, it's like a rabbit hole for me. The more I understand, the more it's just amazing and powerful. And so if you become the standard of time, you're pretty much integrated into everything. So that's why I'm a big believer in this technology and making sure that it can be used for everybody. Like you said, make it accessible to people. So I want to thank my panelists. I think fantastic conversation. Everybody give them a round of applause. And I hope you guys can, for drinks, I hope you guys can stay around and kind of talk to everybody. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.